Some viewers really don't like that I use such a long bar even on small material. They're having a rough time with the whole concept. They say things like, this guy's just trying to show off his big chainsaw, or this guy is obviously compensating using that long bar on this small wood. But when I really think about it, maybe they're right. Maybe this is just me compensating. Yeah, this is just me compensating. I'm compensating for the distance between where it's comfortable to hold the saw and the material I'm working on. There's a gap between there and here. The long bar fills that gap. For me, the longer bar is more advantageous on smaller material than it is on larger material. When cutting smaller material, the long bar allows me to stand upright and not have to bend over or squat down to make every one of these little cuts. If you have longer cuts to make on larger logs, sometimes it's worth it to squat down or bend over to get the chainsaw in a position to make a more powerful cut on the log. Sometimes in that case, the longer bar can get in the way. If you're working with a medium-sized log like this and you want to dig your dogs into it and get a good powerful cut, in a case like this, the long bar is not really an advantage. It can sometimes get you into trouble, get into things over here you don't want, maybe the dirt. If this is your style of cutting, where you spend most of your time digging your dogs in, which is actually where you get your most powerful cuts, a shorter bar would be an advantage in that situation. Also, this extra length of bar creates more friction. It takes some power away from the cut. A short bar in a case like this, you're going to get more power. Where the long bar really shines is with the small material, because it allows us to work in an upright position. Not only is this more comfortable, it also gives us more mobility. Standing upright is a more natural position for walking. Even though the longer bar may not always be the best for making the larger cuts, it can still give us advantages. We are not only looking for the most powerful, fastest cut, we're also looking for function. A lot of times trees can land in some very dangerous situations where you don't know what the log is going to do when you cut it off. Or a lot of times we do know what the log is going to do, and what the log is going to do is what we're concerned about. We may make the first part of our cut like this, which is the most powerful cut, but when we're about to cut through and the log might move, the long bar allows us the ability to stand back a distance. Even though we may lose just a little bit of cutting performance using such a long bar on a smaller log like this, it's worth it to us for the extra options it gives us, such as the ability to get back and cut a dangerous log from a safer position. If this log does something mean, nasty, and ugly, I already have a head start on getting out of its way. But if I have a short bar, I have to be right here up in this log's business the whole time. With the long bars, we sacrifice a little bit of power and have a little bit more weight to gain a lot more functionality for what we do. Sometimes the longer bar can be an advantage when making these larger cuts, but a lot of times it really isn't. When logging, I keep the longer bar on there because I know most of the cuts I make are not going to be these larger cuts. Most of the cuts I make are going to be the smaller cuts, cutting all the limbs off the tree, or cutting brush around the tree, cutting small material and obstacles around the tree. Cutting that small material is where the big advantage is with the long bar, and the small material is the main reason why I use the long bar. If I have a shorter bar, look, I can't even reach it. In order to reach, I have to bend over. Each one I have to bend over. or get down on the ground. Now to make the next cut, I got to either scoot over or get up and scoot over, or I could compensate for the distance between standing comfortably upright and the material I'm working on. Cut it from a more comfortable position. Nothing against this saw with a short bar. I use this saw a lot. It has its purpose. But what I'm showing you here is not the kind of situation I would use this a lot. Thanks again, Dan, for the saw. I use it a lot. For what I'm doing here, I like a 32-inch bar. It fits well for my height. If you're a shorter person, you might need a shorter bar. A lot of times when we choose bar length, it has less to do with the size of wood we're cutting. It has more to do with our own height and what fits us in relation to what it is we're going to be doing with it. Obviously, an exception to that is if you're working with very large trees, having a long bar is an obvious choice for obvious reasons. For some things, I like a 24, especially for things like cutting firewood where it's up off the ground. That's where the 24 really shines, when there's not as much distance to have to compensate for. Years ago, when I used to cut a lot of firewood, I preferred the 24-inch bar. A lot of times it was hardwoods, and a lot of hardwoods, they don't fall all the way to the ground. Their limbs catch them, kind of like this one has, and the wood is up off the ground. In that case, the 24 is just perfect for me. Whereas conifers, which I've been working with here more lately, tend to lay more flat on the ground, making them harder to reach comfortably. When I watch some of the East Coast channels, I notice it looks like when they're working with small material, it's not always laying flat on the ground like this. They have a lot of hardwoods, which tend to have bigger limbs. Also, they have the eastern hemlock, which tend to be really limby. I notice a lot of times the log is up here while the limbs are supporting it. Maybe that's not how it always is, but I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a lot on YouTube. If that's the case, I can see where having a short stubby bar would be an advantage for them. I don't know if that's the real reason why they prefer short bars. I'm probably just making things up again. Maybe they can let us know in the comments why it is short bars work best for them. I'm sure they will be respectful about it. They won't get into that ridiculous nonsense of our way is the right way, any other way is wrong because it's not the way we do it. I'm sure they are well above doing something like that. But that doesn't mean we can't still tease them about their short stubby bars because sometimes we are not always real mature out here on the West Coast. But I'm sure they have a good legitimate reason for preferring the short bars. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be using them. Which reminds me of a concept that it seems like I sometimes have to remind a few people on the internet. Not most of you, but a few. And that is, some things are different than other things. Some people are different than other people. Some situations are different than other situations. Just because something works best for you in your situation doesn't mean it's going to work best for everyone else in their situation. I know most of you are saying duh, but when I look at some of the comments I see on not just my channel, but a lot of other channels too, a lot of people need to learn that concept. Sometimes I think I need to make a separate channel just to teach them that concept. But then I'm reminded of the saying, choose your battles. When you see West Coast loggers using these long bars, even when they're cutting small diameter trees, the purpose of the long bar in that case is not because they need it to get through that small diameter tree. The purpose of the long bar is to give us the reach we need for doing a lot of the things we do, especially cutting small material, like cutting the limbs off of these logs that are laying flat on the ground. A lot of times we're using the long bar for the same reason they put a long shaft on a weed whacker. That long shaft gives the operator the ability to work from a comfortable, upright position. I don't want to be down on the ground running a short, stubby weed whacker. I've been doing this for about 3 seconds. I'm already tired of it. So to those who are saying, he just wants to show off his big chainsaw, or he's just compensating, what I have to say to that is, of course I mean that in the most respectful, mature adult kind of way. But this video is not for them. This video is for those who are genuinely curious as to why we use such long bars even on small material. It's a good, valid question. Asking good questions or making good suggestions, that's respectable. But to those who just make ugly comments on people's videos, I suggest psychological help. Although it does serve a purpose, it keeps us on our toes, sometimes it gives us some good material. So we appreciate those people too, but I still suggest psychological help. I know I've been repetitive in this video, saying some of the same things over and over, but I'm not going to say it. That wouldn't be nice. Most of you probably did not need all that repetition. But like they say, repetition is the mother of retention. Well, I don't know if they really say that, but I thought it sounded good. Now to reward you all for sticking with me this long, I'm going to cut I'm going to cut a tree down so we can all watch it fall down and go boom. Okay, it's a small tree. It's not much of a reward, but we'll compensate for its small size by using a big, oversized saw. Okay, watching this small tree fall down was not very exciting. It's not much of a reward, but they say it's the thought that counts. Speaking of thoughts, I have one more thought I'm going to leave you with. Wait, not one more thoughts, one more thought. One more thoughts doesn't make sense, and I only have one thought left. So I have one more thought. For those who are just casual chainsaw users, there's probably no good reason for you to have a big oversized chainsaw like this. If you're only cutting once in a while, bending over once in a while probably isn't going to hurt you any unless you have some kind of physical ailment. Actually, they say exercise is good for us. Bending over, standing up, that's good exercise. For those of us who use a chainsaw a lot, that's when having to squat or bend down all day long can get to be a problem, and it can be restrictive to what we do. If you're only a casual user, don't feel like you need to keep up with the professionals and the YouTubers and have some ridiculous oversized saw that you just don't need.